Good morning, everyone. We'll start in just 1 minute. Okay, here we go. It's 8:30. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District Board of Directors meeting on this beautiful gray fall day. I hope you all had a great summer over the weekend and it's the beginning of the new year here. We're going to start this morning with a call to order and the roll call of the board members. Director Sarkar.
Here.
Director Lemberger.
Present.
Director Perotti is absent this morning. Director McQuarrie.
Get that?
Yeah, I hear you, Jack. I could get early, but yes, sir, you're in there. Vice Chair Tabor.
Here.
And I am present, and we do have a quorum. That takes us to the report regarding the posting of the agenda, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. The agenda was posted on Thursday, November 11th, 2021 at MTD's administrative office, mailed and emailed to those on the agenda list, and posted on MTD's website.
Great. Okay, I'm going to actually stop right here for a second and propose a change in the agenda. If I could get a consent on this. I understand that Director McQuarrie has to leave at 9:30. We do have an item number 9, the purchase of the 5 battery electric buses, which I think is very important to take. I propose that we switch those two, take item 9 before item 8. Are there any objections to that, or let the record stand like that? I see no objections. Okay, so we will take those in reverse order as we go through the agenda. That takes us to the consent calendar. This is the approval of the minutes. Item 4, the approval of the minutes for the meeting of October 19th, 2021. And item 5, cash report for the periods October 9th through October 22nd, and also October 23rd through November 5th, 2021. Questions or comments on either of those two items before I ask for a motion? Director Tabor.
Mr. Chair, I noted on the minutes that the roll call showed all members present. I believe we had one person absent last week.
I think that is the case. So we should check that and correct the record in that regard. Okay, any other? If not any, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, Director Tabor. Director McQuarrie seconded that motion. Okay, I will do a roll call vote. Again, Director Sarkar.
Move to approve.
Right. Director Lemberger.
Aye.
Director McQuarrie.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
Chair Davis votes yes, and Director Perotti was absent. The vote is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with 1 absent. Very good. That's including the consent calendar. Madam Clerk, we're on item 6, public comment for items within our purview, but not on the agenda today. Is anyone wishing to speak under general public comment?
I don't have any comments today.
Great, very good. Takes us to our first action item. This is the fiscal year 2021 audited financial statements and reports. Mr. Estrada, you want to open this? Introduce Mr. Martinez.
Certainly. Good morning, Chair Davis and members of the board. I'd like to introduce Mr. Martinez, the principal for Vasquez and Company, who performed the single audit this year. And at this point, I'd like to hand it off to Mr. Martinez to provide you with his presentation and the results of the audit. Thank you.
Great. Good. Welcome. Good morning, Mr. Martinez. You're muted. No problem.
Good morning, Mr. Davis, and good morning, members of the board. Mr. Estrada, thank you so much for the introduction. It is a pleasure to have been working with your staff for the last few months on your financial statement audit. I just want to start by thanking you again for selecting our firm as your new auditors. With me today is Lynn Lavastilla, who was the senior manager in charge of the audit and someone with over 20 years of experience. We do have a presentation for you to go over our required communications. And I believe somebody will be controlling the presentation. Is that correct, Mr. Estrada?
That's correct.
If we could move to the next slide, please. to the agenda. And what we have listed here are the items that we do need to cover with you. Again, as your auditors, we have formal communication that we need to go over with you, primarily to discuss the areas of risk that we looked at, the results of our procedures, as well as inform you on the opinions that we're giving on the different areas of the audit. Next slide. First of all, I just wanted to show you, it is always a team effort from your end as well as from our end. The individuals that we identified selected to work on your audit are individuals that have significant amount of transportation experience. As you can see here, we have several partners that work on the account, from quality control review to Lynn, who led our regular audit team. We also had a separate component, as we mentioned in our planning letter to you. There is a separate IT team that review your IT general controls as well as your IT application controls that were necessary for us to test in order to be able to rely on those systems for us to be able to opine on your financial statements. Overall, a team effort. For every hour we spend, your team is probably spending 2 to 3 hours. So again, we just want to thank everybody for all the help that was provided to us during the audit. Next slide. I do want to start by reminding you that we are completely independent of the organization. There are no matters, no conflicts, or any issues that would have an impact on our independence, either relationships with the organization, board, or members of management. Next slide. So what was the scope of our engagement? Our scope was to render an opinion on your financial statements as of June 30th, 2021, as well as a compliance audit, which is commonly referred to as the single audit, over your federal expenditures. That is where we determine if you complied in all material respects with the federal guidelines. Next slide. So what were the results of our audit? Next slide. Based upon our procedures that we perform, we are rendering a clean opinion. The formal term is unmodified opinion. We believe that your financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects, that they fairly present your financial position, the results of operations, the changes in net position, as well as the cash flows. We did not identify material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we need to bring to your attention. That is a requirement under government auditing standards. We also did not identify any material non-compliance that would have a material impact on your financial statements. There are 2 reports that we issue in a financial statement audit under government auditing standard. One which is on the financial statements, the second one which is on your overall compliance with laws, regulations, and significant contracts, grants that could have a material impact on your financial statements. In a government or in an audit under government auditing standards, there's also one of the things we test for is potential abuse. We do perform procedures regarding fraud, primarily in the form of inquiries of all individuals at all levels, from the board, upper management, as well as individuals that we randomly select throughout the audit. And one of the things we also consider is abuse of the organization's assets for personal use. There were no matters that came to our attention that we need to bring to you at this time. Next slide. When it comes to the single audit, we look into your different expenditures that you receive. Not every grant is subjected to audit procedures. The federal government has a very prescriptive risk approach that we follow. Based upon that determination, we also look as to which grants need to be tested, which expenditures but we also identify as to what specific compliance procedures are required for us to test. Based upon the results of our procedures, we did not identify any material non-compliance to your federal awards. There were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Just like we do in the single audit, we're looking at internal controls or matters that could have an impact on your financial statements. Under the single audit, we're looking for internal controls over compliance, non-compliance, things that we would be required to report to you as the governing body, but also to the federal government. Again, there are no issues that we need to bring to your attention that rise to that level. Next slide. As you can see here, the one major program that was identified was the Federal Transit Formula Grants. We, based upon the dollars expenditures, the federal government indicates as to what is the thresholds that we need to follow. In this case, it is the standard threshold of 750,000. You did qualify as a low risk auditee, and that is determined based upon your last 3 years history. This is very important because if you qualify as a low risk auditee, it means that the different thresholds that we have to follow and test are lower than an entity that does not qualify as a low risk auditee. Next slide. One of the things that we want to inform you is when it comes to the single audit and the compliance testing, if we do find exceptions, we are required to include this, and they're commonly referred to as just as findings. There were no exceptions noted during our testing, and there was no non-compliance material to the financial statements that have to be reported. Overall, you had a clean report. Next slide. We do need to give you an update as to the prior year findings. There was one finding noted in your last year's report indicating that the district had not performed a physical count of inventory during the fiscal year. That finding was corrected in fiscal year 2021, and therefore it is not, I'm happy to report that it is no longer an issue. Next slide. Next slide. Now, when we perform an audit, one of the things that we're always looking at is where could things go wrong? What could happen that could have a material impact on your financial statements? And we do that based upon our knowledge of the industry, as well as on the conversations we have with management, based upon reading your minutes, identifying what were the significant matters that took place. For example, you are talking right now about acquisition of electric buses. Those are significant expenditures. So based upon that, that's how we design our approach. What we have listed here are some of the key areas, from cash equivalents, your receivables, capital assets, and the concerns that we look for. Based upon the results of our procedures, there were no material exceptions for any of the specific financial statement captions that we need to bring to your attention. Next slide. Again, we continue with some of the other areas and the different risks, the advances on grants, claims liability, your OPIB liability. This is by far the most significant estimate that you have, and most complex estimate, because you do involve actuaries that we have to utilize their studies to determine what is the right amount or what is the right liability that needs to be recorded on your financial statements. In a similar fashion, when it comes to revenues, we have to look at, are you properly recognizing revenue when you have truly earned those revenues? In many ways, and there are different revenue streams, and we have to look as to when you are allowed to record and recognize that revenue as earned. One of the most unusual items, of course, was the CARES Act grant, which was $5.8 million. We tested and we looked for how it was recognized. There were no exceptions that we identified. When it comes to expenses, we look at your disbursements process. We look as to how you're managing the day-to-day activities by testing the controls and the approval process. At the same time, we perform analytical reviews to determine if there are any unusual matters. No such issues came to our attention. Next slide. As I mentioned to you before, a part of our audit process is to look into your internal controls. We do not look at every single internal control, but instead we look at the key controls that we need to rely on in order for us to be able to render an opinion on your financial statements and your compliance. It is based upon that review of those and test of those controls that we have recommendations for management. These are summarized at a high level. We are providing management with a detailed write-up on our comments, especially on IT. And the reason why we always provide that detailed write-up. But one of the things I do want to warn you is that we typically consider IT comments to be confidential in nature, given that hackers can always utilize our recommendations to see where weaknesses exist. But for a very high level, our first recommendation is to perform regular review and document the approval of IT policies and procedures. It is very important that your IT policies and procedures are always updated and that they are approved by all levels, all the way to the board. That you establish a formal IT strategic plan that aligns with your business plan. IT is always supposed to be an enabler to your business plan. And that's something that we're recommending. That you enhance and obtain the approval of your disaster recovery and business continuity plan and perform regular testing of that plan. Now, this is actually a common finding for this past year, simply because IT departments were so busy trying to deal with the pandemic, providing access to individuals to be able to work remotely, and just trying to do so many other things. And the reality is that there is a shortage of IT professionals out there. So this is common, but we still need to remind you in that disaster recovery and business continuity plan has to be tested on a regular basis. We also recommend that you conduct a mandatory security awareness training for all employees, and that you increase the frequency how that training is performed, simply because it only takes one person to click on a phishing email to open the door for hackers to come in. And that's something very, very important. Number 5, it is that to enhance your password policy and strengthen the password controls. And AD, SBT Pro, and Genfer are different applications that are utilized by the organization. Number 6, which is to improve the administration access levels in SBT Pro. As I mentioned to you, we look not just at your IT general controls, but we also look at key applications controls. And in this case, for SBT Pro, there are certain best practices that should be followed in improving as to who has administration access, always making sure that the right individuals have the right access, but also that you restrict who actually has access to especially the administration level. Again, there is a more detailed write-up on all of these recommendations that we are providing to management. Next slide. This is the part that I need to remind you. We could spend days talking about the upcoming changes to the accounting standards. What I do want to point out to you is that there are 4 standards that we believe may have an impact on the organization in 2022, and there's 4 more in 2023. Our commitment to you is in that we will always provide the necessary guidance and assistance in the implementation of new accounting standards to staff. Next slide. Now, this brings me to the required communications, which is to inform you in that it is management that has primary responsibility over your financial statements. It is their responsibility to establish a system of internal controls over financial reporting, as well as over compliance, to prevent errors, whether they are material, individually material, or in the aggregate that could have a material impact. Our responsibility is to render an opinion on your financial statements, to render an opinion on your compliance. We review your significant accounting policies, and we believe, and they are listed in your financial statements, and we believe that they are in accordance with the standards. There were no controversial issues during the course of the audit, or actually during the year. And when we're talking about controversial issues, we're talking about accounting matters for which there is no authoritative guidance, and that somehow management would be required to put and then you take a position on something. When that happens, it is mandatory that we bring that to your attention. There were no such issues. Next slide, please. There were no material audit adjustments that were made during the year or that we had to propose during the course of the audit. We did not have any disagreements with management on financial accounting or reporting matters or audit matters. And it is okay to disagree. Sometimes we do disagree with management on specific issues. That does not mean that we're not collaborating. It just means that we may take a different point of view on matters. When that happens, we need to bring that to your attention and inform you why there is a disagreement. But again, there were no such issues. We're not aware of management having consulted with other accountants. This is an issue for potential opinion shopping. And there were no conditions placed on us prior to being retained as your auditors. The most significant communication that we had with management was really all about being engaged as your new auditors. Next slide. I do need to also let you know, just like we didn't have any disagreements, there were no difficulties that we had with management in the performance of the audit. If we encounter difficulties, we are required to bring that to your attention. Even though there was a change, there was a departure in your within staff, Mr. Strada stepped in, provided the additional assistance. Overall, we believe that management provided us with complete access to your records and made themselves available to assist us throughout the course of the audit. One of the things I do need to also mention is that we did not identify any fraud, illegal acts, or irregularities that came about either through our fraud interviews or as a result of our audit procedures. And the last thing I do need to mention to you is in that management signs a representation letter indicating that they have given us complete access to the records of the organization. Next slide. That brings to a conclusion our presentation, and now I would like to open it for any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Martinez, and thank your staff and our staff for the tremendous effort to do this. I know it takes a lot of time and a lot of coordination to make this thing come out as it did. And I also want to compliment you on your presentation. I know you probably have this pretty much down, but it's a great presentation. We all see a lot of audits, and I do compliment you on your presentation. Comments, questions from the board? I'm not seeing a whole lot of questions. I have a lot of questions that go into to management relative to the management discussion, but they're all basically program type questions. They're not audit questions. you raised a lot of questions as to the status of this program or this fund or that fund, which I'd like to have further discussion at some point, but we don't need to do that this morning. If there are no questions or comments from the board, we want to see first if there's any. Oh, I do have Vice Chair Tabor, Dave.
Well, you threw comments in there, so I only had some comments. So first off, I don't recall getting extensive recommendations from in an audit before, so I'd like to thank Vasquez and Mr. Martinez for coming forward with those. And to me, the audit, it's a comforting annual reminder that our staff, financial staff in particular, are on top of the very important numbers they need to keep control of, and my goodness, all the reports they have to do. So I'd like to thank Jerry and Theus and Brad and Absentia for keeping the ship afloat and pointing in the right direction. And for me as a director also, it's an annual, clear, concise statement of what it is that we do and how we do it. So I always look forward to this, kind of keep my ship going in the right direction. So thanks to everybody.
Great comments. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask the clerk if there's anyone who wishes to speak from the public.
I have a hand raised from Howard Green, so I'm going to
Okay.
allow him to talk.
Thank you. Mr. Green, when you're ready to unmute yourself.
I had to find the right button, but thank
There
you.
There you go.
Chair
Please take 2 minutes. Go ahead.
My first comment is my hand was raised for the general comment, and at some point I'd appreciate that. But on the audit, I'm not sure as an IT professional, I understand why the entire report, the detailed write-up that the auditor mentioned, should not be available as a public record. Yes, I understand about hackers, but many of the programs that you use are commercially available, usually under restricted licenses, but like your fare collection system and your scheduling routing system. So that would be a recommendation that they be available at least to the members of the board, and very likely in some redacted form for the public. That's all on this topic. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Green, when we're done with this topic, I may ask to reopen general public comment to catch you. So Hank, stay there and we'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Not seeing anybody else from the public, we'll come back to the board for any final comment or motion. And the motion that we're looking for the board to accept the draft fiscal year audited financial statement and report.
So moved.
I have a motion by Director McQuarrie to approve the acceptance. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Director Sarkar did second it. And we're going to do a roll call vote. Director Sarkar.
Move to approve.
Director Lemberger.
Aye.
Director Prodi is absent. Director McQuarrie.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
And Chair Davis votes yes. The acceptance of the audit is moved and approved on a 5-1 vote, or 5 to 1 absent vote. Again, Mr. Martinez, Ms. Labastilla, thank you so much for the work that you've done here. And also thank you to our staff, because I know how much, again, they just have to keep supplying information. So kudos all around. And I look forward to working with your firm again next year. I take Mr. Tabor's comments and second those. They're really well done. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do need to say thank you to Theus and Mr. Strada. They really step up and we appreciate all their help.
Great. Again, we'll second that one too.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Beth. Okay, thank you all. We're going to move then. I'm going to ask for a motion to reopen the general public comment. Can I have a motion, a second to do that?
So moved.
Second.
And a second by McQuarrie, first Tabor McQuarrie. Okay, we're reopening the general public comment. Madam Clerk, I'm going to go back to Mr. Green.
Thank you for returning to the open public comment.
Yeah.
I am aware that much of the funding or some of the funding for the old State Street shuttle was from city parking revenues, and those fell off, of course, at the beginning of the pandemic, and that particular service was suspended. The concern I have is that as the State Street renovation planning is going on, there should be some representation of the transit district on that committee, and particularly for the transit district independently to look at perhaps a few additional stops on Chapala for an upbound and on Anacapa for a down street suggestion. There are stops that are pretty adequate on the Anacapa, but there was a stop at the old Nordstrom's or near the old Nordstrom's that was removed, and that makes it inconvenient for riders of the 20, the 16, and perhaps someday again the crosstown shuttle. So I would ask that that be included in your operating and strategic plans. Thank you.
Dave, you're muted.
Thanks for the reminder. It helps. We don't usually respond to comments, but I'll just let you know that Ms. Blackerby and myself are both on that committee, so MTD is well represented, and the transit will be part of the State Street master plan process. Okay, that's going to move us on then, and we flip the items to the agenda item number 9, which we'll be taking out of order. This is the purchase of 5 40-foot New Flyer battery electric buses. Jerry.
Yes, I'd like to introduce Ms. Valerie White, our acting procurement officer, and Mr. Ryan Grip, our capital project manager, to brief you on the recommendation to increase the size of our order for 40-foot electric buses. Valerie, Ryan, it's all yours.
Oh, thank you. Well, hello.
Morning.
This morning, staff is requesting authority to award a contract to New Flyer to procure 5 40-foot battery electric transit buses for $5,905,595. This contingent upon receipt of the Federal Transit Administration mandated pre-award Buy America audit report. So if I can quickly take you back in time to the board meeting on September 15th, 2020, where staff presented and the board approved the purchase of 4 battery electric transit buses from New Flyer. And this here is extending that acquisition by 5 for a total of 9 new battery electric buses to be introduced to our fleet. The purchase is by way of a statewide contract for zero emission bus acquisitions through the California Department of General Services, referred to as DGS. Now, MTD procurement policies, in line with the FTAs, allow MTD to obtain contractual rights through the assignment of state cooperative purchasing contracts, such as this contract between New Flyer and DGS, when 3 conditions are met. 1, the contract originally procured the quantities necessary for the assigning needs. Check. The DGS contract specifically offers volume discounts for purchases of 5 battery electric buses through December 2022. 2, that the original contract provisions comply with all the applicable federal requirements. Check. The same FTA contract provisions that MTD requires with contracts was included in this DGS contract. And 3, that the original contract price remains fair and reasonable. Well, DGS performed a price analysis at the time of the contract. For the September 2020 board presentation, MTD staff performed a second price analysis. And now looking at 2021 prices for 40-foot battery electric heavy duty transit buses, staff's due diligence still confirms that the DGS is a solid contract, as all 3 reviews yielded a fair and reasonable price. So check. In the staff report included in the board packet before you, there's a little snippet of this 2021 price analysis. What makes this increase in the bus order possible is this year, MTD was awarded $3,834,462 of a fiscal year 2017-18 FTA 5339 grant money designated for the acquisition of 5 additional battery electric buses. So New Flyer has quoted each bus at a contract price of $1,081,119 per bus, which will total $5,405,595 for 5 buses, where MTD staff is recommending to mark the remaining budgeted money as a contingency to be used if needed to cover any configuration or specification changes that may occur between now and production. And still, there are channels to mitigate MTD's costs. Staff will be looking into applying for the California Air Resource Board's hybrid and zero emission truck and bus voucher incentive project, which you may have heard as HVIP, and the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust. These are 2 grant funding opportunities. So the action item before you is the acquisition of 5 additional New Flyer 40-foot Excelsiors. Staff also recommending that caveat that the purchase is subject to pre-award Buy America audit provisions. Although it was self-certified in the DGS contract, the FTA does require that procurement and final assembly of rolling stock occurs in the US. So the final piece here is to perform an audit of the manufacturer. And you know, I'm always enthusiastic coming before you about all things transit, but you can see I'm a little bit extra about this one because the recommendation is in line with the board adopted goal, the CARB's innovative clean transit regulation to transition the fleet to 100% zero emission. So the intent of this purchase is to place zero emission vehicles in service and retire diesel engine buses that have exceeded their useful life. So I'll wrap the presentation explanation there, but of course, happy to answer question. And as Jerry said, Ryan Grip is also on this call and may want to add a little there, but thank you.
Valerie, I think that
Ryan,
was,
you want to add anything?
thank you, Chair Davis. I don't. I think Valerie did an excellent job. Wonderful summary. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Good, thank you. Good presentation, good report that we read. Are there any questions from the board at this point before I go to public comment? Chuck, Director McQuarrie.
Yes. These buses, are they going to have unique MTD specification in terms of colors and patterns and everything on the interior, as well as anything that might be to our specification in the operating systems? And I guess as a follow-up to that, during the production, will we have somebody at key times stationed back there to monitor the progress and making sure that everything is going according to our specifications? That's my question.
Perfect. Ryan, I mean, that's you to be that double checker that we're progressing. So I'll let you answer about the specifications.
Thank you, Ms. White. Appreciate it. Happy to answer those questions. So starting with the specifications themselves, Director McQuarrie, yes, the actual look of the vehicles will be branded to MTD specifications, the ones that we've seen most recently. So they will be very similar to the 10 Gillig diesel buses we bought several years ago in terms of the branding, as well as what the board has seen in terms of the microtransit passenger vans. They will also indicate that they are electric zero emission vehicles as part of the branding. On the interior, same thing, MTD's kind of look and feel in terms of color scheme, material choices, seating layout, and all the configurations that we do in the driver area for the operators. The other question was, remind me, forgive me.
checking the progress to make sure we get delivery on schedule.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Ms. White. So that is a key component to any bus build. We will hire a third-party auditor to evaluate the vehicles when they are online and in production at the New Flyer facility in the United States. New Flyer does partial assembly in Canada, and then they bring the vehicles to their United States facilities for final assembly and all the finished work, during which time we'll have somebody there making sure that A, that build quality is up to our standard, and B, that the actual configuration of the vehicle meets MTD specifications.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah, Dave. I'm sorry, Dave, you had your hand raised. I saw that.
Thank you. I noted in the manager's report there was a change to the ones we have on order for the front charge ports. I imagine there's a minor cost to that. Does the cost that you have in your snippet include the modification of the front charge port? And I also had a question on delivery. Since we're ordering these buses a year after we ordered the first buses, will they come all in one package, or do we have to wait another year to receive these?
Go ahead, Ryan. Did you want to field that?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that. Great questions. Yes, the price of the front charge ports is included in our board presentation here. That price is about $7,500 per charge port. The addition is critical for MTD. For the first 4, we were originally told that New Flyer was not offering front charge ports. Subsequent to that, and after a lot of dialogue, they have indicated that there is a willingness to go ahead and engineer front charge ports. The purpose of which for us is flexibility in the charging infrastructure. As we reported during the capital projects update in the last meeting, and we're installing 14 heavy duty chargers under our maintenance canopy, the design of which is such that we need charge ports in the front and the rear of the bus. That's something that other OEMs are offering in their battery electric vehicles, something that New Flyer hadn't done but is now doing. And so we're excited to be adding that onto all 9 of the vehicles. I apologize, I did it again. Your second question was?
Delivery, whether all the buses would be coming at the same time, or whether we'd have to wait a year for the other 5 to get here.
Yes, so we'll be able to add the 5 additional units to the first 4. Delivery of the first 4 was pushed back as a result of the charging infrastructure project. So we had hoped originally it was Q1 of 2022 that those first 4 were going to be delivered. Because the Charge Ready project, the infrastructure was pushed back some, we've pushed back the delivery of those 4 units to Q3 of 2024, and we'll be able to add on these additional 5 to Q3 of 2022. So these 5 units, right, for a total of 9 will be delivered Q3 of 2022.
Thank you.
Good. Other questions? Not seeing any. I'll go to the clerk, see if there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item. Christina?
Yep. Let me just a moment. I believe we have a public comment coming in from Brett Garrett. Let's see.
Hi, yeah, this is.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Brett.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I strongly support electrifying transportation, and this looks like a very exciting opportunity, especially in combination with the solar microgrid that I saw in the agenda. So I just want to say thank you and congratulations, and yeah, please move forward. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for your comment. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? If not any, we're looking for a motion. Motion is that we authorize the general manager to execute a contract with New Flyer for $5,905,595 to procure 5 40-foot low-floor battery electric buses and accessories. Is there a motion to that effect?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to enthusiastically make that motion. I apologize if it doesn't match our Mrs. White's enthusiasm.
And I'll second that motion and agreed. Just want to echo Ms. White's enthusiasm on this one as well.
Okay, motion by Tabor, seconded by Sarkar. And I'll enthusiastically ask for your vote. Director Sarkar.
Aye.
Go enthusiastically.
Okay, move to approve, move to approve.
Lemberger.
Enthusiastically, aye.
Absolutely. I can hear Paula jumping even though she's absent. Director McQuarrie.
Joyously, yes.
Yeah, all right. Vice Chair Tabor.
Happy day, and I have 2 thumbs up, but one's on the space bar.
And I vote yes. Motion passes 5-1 with one, 5 with one absent. Congratulations. Thank you for the enthusiasm. You've enthused us all. And Ryan, thank you for calling in. I think that you couldn't get that second part because you're 3 hours delay back there. So
That's right. Thank you all very much.
all right, no, good report. And Chuck, I'm getting you out of here. That motion's done. You can hang out for 15 more minutes and go take care of your personal business. That takes us to item 8. This is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act.
Yeah.
Mr. Estrada, Jerry.
Well, thank you, Chair Davis. I just want to point out the amount of work that went into the last item by the entire staff, from the infrastructure that we need to build out at our current facility and the old facility that we need to refurbish out in Goleta in order to order these vehicles. You have to have the infrastructure, which is a perfect segue for this agenda item, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's finally here and it's signed into law. So it's an exciting time. We may not have a lot of details for you as everybody's trying to find out exactly what's in the bill, but I did ask Mr. Moss to prepare a report for you to kind of give you the big picture and the highlights of what's in store for public transit throughout the United States. So Steve, it's all yours.
Thank you, General Manager. Good morning, Chair Davis and Board. So yeah, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also you might hear it referred to as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Deal, or BID, same thing. Not to be confused with the Build Back Better Act, which is still in the House, and then if it passes the House, will go to the Senate. But this is what they call hard infrastructure. The other one that's still underway is more soft infrastructure. So it's a huge bill, $1.2 trillion, the largest investment in infrastructure in the nation's history. And of that 1.2 trillion, approximately 550 billion of it is new money above and beyond the baseline funding from previous bills. So pretty big. You see in the summary in my staff report a list of some of where the 550 billion in new money is going. A lot of different types of infrastructure. And 39.2 billion of that new money is for public transit. Although, as I mentioned in the staff report, a lot of that is not funding that MTD is eligible for. It's for rail and fixed guideway of different types. But there, so the total public transit funding in the bill, and this bill does include the new 5-year transportation bill. Total public transit funding over the 5 years is $106.9 billion. And one change from previous years is the bulk of that money is guaranteed. Typically, the transportation bill authorizes the funding, but it has to be approved each year by Congress. This year, much of the money is pre-approved. So of the 106.9 billion, 91.9 billion of it in the 5 years is guaranteed funding, and only 15.8 billion of it is subject to annual appropriations. So that's big. As I mentioned, much of that is for programs that we aren't eligible for, such as capital investment grants for fixed guideway and the federal State of Good Repair program, which is a rail program. We do get money from the California State of Good Repair program, which is a completely separate program, not really a part of this discussion. So anyhow, again, a lot of money. The two programs that we primarily typically get money from is Section 5307, which we use for operating, and Section 5339A, the formula program of the 5339 programs that is limited to capital. Both of those programs, nationwide totals are growing by 42.5% by the end of this bill in 2026, fiscal year 2026. So the 5339A for the formula program, we expect we'll continue to get that money, which might grow from about the 464.6 million we got in the most recent year to up to 662. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the statewide. The MTD's apportionment is expected to grow to 689,000 by the end of this, which is a pretty substantial increase. Still not a huge amount of money. The 5307, if the Santa Barbara urbanized area stays under 200,000, which is doubtful, frankly, but possible, we might see a fairly substantial increase. However, as we've discussed with the board before, we expect that when the urbanized area numbers are released in 2023, according to SBCAG, we expect that we'll be over 200,000. So as we've talked about the board before, we would expect under the old bill that we would have lost about $1.9 million annually due to the loss of the STIC, the small transit intensive communities money, and some changes in the formula. Well, if we do go under 200,000, my initial estimation is that we would end up with a small decrease overall. The increase in the funding would offset most of the money that we would lose from the STIC, but not all of it. So we would probably end up with a small decrease. As I say, if we stay under 200,000, we can expect a substantial increase in the funding. And then back to 5339. So as I mentioned, the formula program, we expect to see an increase there. The other two programs, B, bus facilities, and C, low or no emission vehicles, are both increasing. Those are both nationwide competitive programs. We apply for both each year. In fact, this week we'll be submitting our application for last year's 5339B project, which is just now coming about. That's still under the old bill, so it didn't see the increase that we talked about here on a nationwide basis. We're hopeful, though, that we'll qualify. The last time we got funding from that program was fiscal year 2016. We've applied each year since, always got high ratings on our applications. However, they'd like to spread the money around, and plus, changes in administration and so on. We're hopeful that maybe we'll get some funding this year. So we do have major outstanding obligations that we need to do, as you know. If you look at the last page of the staff report, we've currently got 38 buses that are beyond their useful lives and need replacement. If those are all electric buses, we estimate that at $41.8 million. We've got, as you know, work underway at T1 and work coming up at T2 for a total of $35 million for those. So, we're hopeful that some of these increases in funding will allow us to fund some of that work that's due. There are a couple of other programs that we hope we'd be eligible for. There's some public transportation safety program money, which we would likely be able to qualify for some of that. And then there's two projects outside of public transit, the power and grid program and the electric vehicle charging program, that they haven't laid out really who's going to be eligible and what the rules are for those, but we'll certainly be monitoring those. And we hope that we'll be able to get some funding from those programs to help our electrification projects. So I think that's everything I wanted to mention. I'd be happy to attempt to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, Chuck, you have a question, Director McQuarrie.
And trying to make up a budget, what's the timing on some of this potential money? Is it going to be within our current operating time, or well, anyway, I have a phone in the background. Anyway, I was wondering about the timing of this money and how it's going to affect our budget planning in the near term.
Actually, that question reminds me of one thing I did mean to mention that I didn't. With the 5307 program, we should qualify for at least the first year of it, because this current fiscal year 22, is the first year of this new program. The UZA numbers, as I say, won't come out till 2023. So hopefully we'll get at least 1 year of expanded funding from 5307 for budgeting purposes. The rest of the programs, I don't know, frankly, how soon it'll be before they've come out with the rules and who's eligible and what types of projects are eligible for all these pots. Jerry, I don't know if you've heard more from your contacts than I have.
No, I think it's a fair question. We're all excited. I think we'll be coming back to the board early in 2022 when we have more information. We knew this was in the news. There was going to be questions. So we wanted to put this on the agenda and share what we know at this time. But yeah, the details, as Director McQuarrie is asking about timing, I think will hopefully be a little bit clearer to us by early spring or at least the end of the first quarter of 2022.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions, but we'll stay tuned, Jerry and Steve, on seeing where things go. Anybody from the public wish to speak under this, Christina?
Don't have any public comments.
No public comments. Okay, this was simply a presentation. Thank you for the background, and look forward to seeing how this plays out for us. Well, either way, either we're going to get some money or it's going to keep us pretty balanced. So one way or the other, it's a good deal. So thank you for the update. That takes us on to item 10. This is the Next Wave project update. Yeah, take a big swig there, Hillary. You got to talk now for a while.
Yeah, I'd like to open this up, and where we're at with this, as you remember, the board a month ago, we gave you an update on kind of the nuts and bolts of all of our capital projects. And it was exciting. You see all the things we have going on, from bus purchases to infrastructure improvements, et cetera. So I asked Hillary, our planning and marketing manager, to put together a presentation that kind of brings it together for the board and for the public, to kind of share kind of the vision of how all these things come together and make for an enhanced public transit service. And Hillary's here to do that today, and it's all yours, Hillary.
Okay, thank you, Chair and Board. Great to be with you today, and always good to follow news of electric bus acquisitions, infrastructure money, and get to take us home here with the rest. So I'm going to share my screen, share some. Oh, I need to be allowed to do so. If Christina could give me such power. Here we go. All right. Okay. So let me, sorry. All right. Can everybody see the full screen? Okay, cool. So Next Wave project update. Some of you might be saying, what is that? How are we getting an update? Have we heard that? We heard that name before, that title before? I'm going to start off with just, I've got some slides here, but we're going to sort of imagine for a moment. Not going to bog you down with a bunch of writing on slides or images. I'm going to tell you, just sort of imagine a circumstance here. I'm going to explain, and then we'll talk about all the different components of it. So this is the scenario. A woman who lives in downtown Santa Barbara has plans for lunch with her friends in Goleta. She checks Google Maps and sees real-time information that her bus is only 10 minutes away. She rides her bike from her house to her bus stop, which is well appointed with a nice clean bench. She doesn't wait long at her stop, and when the bus arrives, there's room for her bike on the 3-position bike rack on the front of the bus. She loads her bike, boards, and pays contactlessly with her smartphone's mobile wallet. The bus she boards is quiet, clean, and electric. It was charged at a facility with a renewable energy microgrid, ready to roll despite any outages or emergencies thanks to a resilient system. The passenger has a comfortable and clean seat and connects to the free Wi-Fi on board. She sits back and relaxes as the bus moves efficiently through intersections, hitting green lights down the State and Hollister corridor, and taking advantage of queue jumps and bus-only lanes. She arrives at her stop in record time, unloads her bike, and is on time to meet friends for lunch. So that's just sort of a picture trying to encompass all the different things, at least most of the different things that make up what we call the Next Wave project. And that name, I will say, was a part of a brainstorming session back when we were working on a TIRCP grant in late 2019. And I actually think the recently retired Brad Davis came up with that. So we'll give him kudos, even though he's not here anymore. So what is that? What is the project? And it is change, ebbed and flowed, to use the the water, the wave metaphor here. But essentially, it's a suite of capital and operating projects that, taken together, advance us into a future where transit on the South Coast is convenient, clean in all possible ways, and competitive. And there's sort of three prongs of how we're going to achieve this vision. Enhancing the customer experience, first and foremost, electrification, and then engineering to prioritize transit. And that's one of the ones that's going to take some partnership. So what do we mean by all of these things? You know, there's a lot of umbrellas in here of how we think about these things. And when we talk about customer experience, you know, it's not just like customer service. Was the bus driver nice to you? Did the person at the transit center, sell you the pass and smile at you? But really the whole thing, the whole picture, the investigating anything about the bus, be on the website or Google Maps, actually interacting with us, either you're purchasing fare or maybe you're paying contactlessly, then being on the bus. Is the bus something that you want to experience, right? So from a planning perspective, making sure our service is convenient and reliable. All the work we've done with on-time performance is a big piece of that, making sure we're serving the areas that we need to. Real-time bus information. We've had an app and a texting capability for the past few years, but in the past 4 years, we've had that. But in the past year, we've since released our real-time information into the public, and so it's on Google Maps and things like that. And we try to, keep that data correct and up and running as clean and correct as it can be. And then with cleanliness, right? When we talk about cleanliness, it's not just the fuel type, but it's also on board. And that's something that we've always taken a high priority on, but with the pandemic, that continues in a deeper way than it had before. Open loop contactless fare payment. As you all know, we're only one of 4 in the state, and there aren't very many more in the country that have, contactless fare payment where people can use the thing they already have in their wallet or on their smartphone. And that's something we're proud of and hope to expand out just to make it easier for people, lower the barrier to entry, right? Not having to go get some kind of smart card and load it or buy a pass, or really kind of know anything about the fare structure in order to hop on and pay. And then increasing bike rack capacity. It's something we've talked about for a long time, but can tell you we just put in a pre-application yesterday for the Measure A Cycle 5 bike and pedestrian funding cycle, and that would be to change our 2-position bike racks out to 3. We do have one that we tested and it's gone really well. Operators are happy with it, public's happy with it, maintenance is happy with it, and so we hope to get a little financial boost to be able to switch those out. And then bus stop improvements. I'll talk a bit about grant opportunity here to be able to spruce things up, but that's something that we're always looking at with our stops, not just maintaining them, but how can we improve them. We actually have a pilot going on right now that we just put up last week at the Via Real and Night Ever stop for you Carpenterians out there. It's actually a solar light at the stop where there's really no lighting around. It's a pretty rural stop. And so it's just in time for daylight savings to go away. So if you happen to pass by that stop, let us know. It's a nice bright LED light there now. And then onboard Wi-Fi, this is something we've talked about, and it's something we're getting closer to with our, the upgrades of our equipment online, but it's something that we look to do in the future. So then this second E, electrification, obviously it's something that MTD has been experienced with, from a battery electric perspective, more than almost any other agency in the country over the last 30 years. But things have changed in what that infrastructure looks like. And now with mandates and with our goals, the urgency is definitely here. So we're doing so much planning for this infrastructure, from our facilities master plan, sub modeling, and the rollout plan that will come here in the next little bit, to know what we know we have to transition over, but what do we have to put in place as that foundation to make it possible, right? It's good to order buses, but if there's nothing to plug them into and there's nothing to back that up, it won't last very long. So planning for that, installing that, that's, things are already underway with our light duty project with the Chevy Bolts, and then with the Charge Ready project for the 14 heavy duty chargers. That's, very close to starting. And then building a resilient microgrid with solar and battery storage. It's always been a concern. It's kind of easy to have 14 of your 112 be electric, because if something happened and the grid went down, well, we couldn't use those, but we do have, our diesel, fuel tank. But it gets a little scarier, right, as you get closer to being fully electric. And so we're trying to really be smart about it and, make sure that we have backups on backups with this. And it's good, financial and, energy efficiency sense. And that's something that we're looking at with our blueprint, our zero emission resilient transportation blueprint from the California Energy Commission grant that's getting started. And then, of course, the big one, replacing those vehicles with battery electric vehicles, which we're obviously today taking a huge step in the right direction to get those numbers up. And then this is the one that we just can't do on our own. We really can't. Those first two, we can work on the customer experience, we can work on our fleet, we can work on our infrastructure, and work on ourselves. But the next phase of really making this particularly convenient, right, is an engineering perspective. And so I've been working over the past year or so, reaching out to the various public works departments in the areas that we serve, talking about possibilities for prioritizing transit in certain corridors. One of the big ones is the State and Hollister corridor, really from Sola and the city of Santa Barbara to Stork and Goleta. It's a 10-mile section. There's a lot of intersections, there's a lot of congestion, and there's a lot of bus service. In 2019, half of our lines, or half of our ridership came from lines that touch that State and Hollister corridor, 3 million people. And so it makes sense to try to speed that up and to give a bus that has, a lot of people on it, priority over cars that maybe have 1 to 2 people on them. Give them a leg up to get through, right? Because it's not about moving the bus, it's about moving the people on the bus. So that could be transit signal priority, which looks at, it used to be a lot clunkier. It used to be you have to put a transponder on the bus and a transponder at the signal, and they have to talk to each other. It's a lot simpler now because we have our whole CAD AVL system that tracks our buses, and that can talk to a system, a software system in the cloud that then talks to traffic signal management system that can say, oh, the bus is approaching this intersection, keep the green 10 seconds longer so the bus can get through, right? Things like that. So that's the kind of thing we're looking into. Now, I will tell you that this is probably not a surprise, but traffic signal hardware and software is like some of the things that happen in the transit industry. It's super old. There's not dedicated, consistent streams of funding for upgrading those things. And so our cities and counties, other jurisdictions have legacy systems, really old systems. Some of them are upgrading them. Some of them don't have the funding to yet, but all of them are trying. And so we're starting to work with them to think about ways that we can partner to get that going. Other ways to do it, even without that technology, is basically paint on the street. So queue jumps, in this picture on the right, it shows an example of a queue jump. Basically, changes in striping near an intersection where a bus is able to sort of scoot around the rest of traffic and get a leg up at the intersection to be, one of the first to cross through. Optimizing bus stop locations, something we looked at a couple years ago, the 12X and 24X, sort of balancing those stops. We did that and we're happy with those results. That's possibly something that could happen further. And there may be locations where maybe it makes sense to put the bus stop on the far side of the intersection instead of the near side, so that they can get through and then, pull out while the light is red for folks behind them. And then bus only lanes. These are happening more and more in the country and more in California, in the Bay Area recently, and got to see a beautiful example of this in Oakland, but they're not just in large cities. They're popping up everywhere. Do I think we have, 10 miles of bus only lanes in us? Definitely not, but there are definitely places, for example, El Colegio in Isla Vista, that could be ripe for this, where there's a lot of bus service right now, but it could be even more efficient if buses got a little more priority in the roadway. And there are some really good examples of where these lanes can be bus and bike. And so there's some examples of how, prioritizing transit, starting to have these conversations and work in partnership. And this is a part of our short range transit plan. And we're having these conversations with the various jurisdictions to talk about right of way. So how far have we come? How far into the next wave vision have we come? This coming Sunday is my 5-year anniversary with MTD. Time has flown by, and it's been great. And it's been great to see how many things we've accomplished over, not just since I've been here, but, prior and truly in the past 5 years. Not taking credit for it, just saying I got to be around for a bunch of cool stuff. So we've been putting these into phases. There's a lot on here. I'm not going to drill into absolutely everything, but this project, as we look at it holistically, we keep tacking things into it that improve what we're up to. And so phase one, with the BYD buses and those chargers, that was really phase one, right? The sort of next wave, the new electrification, the new technology. Phase two, some planning, right? Facilities master plan, getting those light duty chargers, Chevy Bolts in, and doing that initial zero emission bus modeling study to tell us what do we need to do with our service and with our procurement. Phase three, that's kind of the phase we're in now. Those microtransit vans, we actually received the first one last week. It looks beautiful. Some things are still getting finalized with that before we get the other three. And of course, we're waiting to have enough of a workforce to start that microtransit service, but excited to start to get those in. And then all the charging and the procurement of these buses that we've talked about earlier today is very exciting. Some upgrading of past electrical infrastructure to get the ports up to what they need to be, from the old e-bus shuttles to new battery electric buses, sort of next generation versions. The blueprint I mentioned about the microgrid, that's something that's underway now. And then the big kahuna is the reactivation of Terminal 2, right? We're bursting at the seams here and needing to expand. Phase 4, these are unfunded items, and they include, starting to put in chargers at Terminal 2 as that reactivation and interim work gets done. More buses, fully electrifying and rehabilitating Terminal 2, further implementing contactless payment, right? Over and above the 18 buses we have it on now. And then trying to test out some transit signal priority technology. Future stuff, obviously, build a microgrid at both facilities, more charging, more resilience measures, and get the fleet out to a place where, we're able to meet that 100% number. So these are all the things taken together with the capital information that Ryan and David shared last month. And what's the point, right? It's you can get caught up in just kind of like buying this, getting that, getting infrastructure, but what does it actually mean for people, And that at the end of the day is what we're the most interested in. Obviously, it benefits them, benefits the environment to have zero emission vehicles, but it's more than that to us, and we want to get to a place where it's not just about the fuel type, but it's about the service we're putting out there, that it makes sense for folks to add it into their everyday life, or at least once a week. So how have we done so far? Because we got to fund all these things, right? And so these are some things that we've been successful in the past few years as far as grant applications and projects. So Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, or what we call TIRCIP. We were in a larger SBCAG application, and so that funded our facilities master plan, and then the interim work that's happening on Terminal 2 at this point. Bus buys, we talked about that, federal money, some state money. Microtransit operations and charging infrastructure. Some of that we're paying for with the low carbon transit operations program. That's cap and trade funds, as is TIRCIP. The resilient energy blueprint that we're working on, that's California Energy Commission, Clean Transportation Program. We are a partner on Isla Vista Community Mobility Plan that's kicking off actually tomorrow night with a listening session at Transportation Town Hall about Isla Vista. And that's an Air Resources Board Sustainable Transportation Equity Program. It's basically a multimodal plan, definitely involves transit, actually involves a test out of bus only lanes on El Colegio, hopefully this next spring. And then our short range transit plan, which is currently underway and was funded by Sustainable Communities Transportation Planning Grants. So how are we going to pay for all this? What are we doing? Well, I can tell you we have a really good team here at MTD that works on really collaboratively and across departments on grant applications. Seemingly, there's always one or two cooking, be it state, federal, local, but we're always working on this and always seeing how those pieces in the puzzle fit in. And with this additional, money, hopefully filling the pots that we apply for, especially at the federal level and the state level, actually, we want to be ready, and I think we are ready to capitalize on that. So these are just some programs that we see as opportunities. Some we've been successful in so far. Some will probably be going after. I mentioned earlier in the presentation about bus stop improvements, right? And getting to a place where we can, do a little more work to spruce things up. And that's the Clean California program. Is a new program put out by the governor this past year, that's not just focused on transit, it's sort of on sprucing things up, cleaning up, different right-of-ways, highway and train corridors, things like that, litter abatement, But one component of it is around transit stations and stops, able to apply for funds to work on that. And this is something that may be a collaborative effort, collaborative application to, some of our corridors that maybe have old bus benches, or maybe the poles are still those galvanized poles that maybe we could upgrade to be the sleeved green poles, and just generally improving our facilities out in the roadway. Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. This is something that we will continue to apply for, starting to work on that now. That's due in March. And that is for large transformative programs that fund our work. It's capital, as it says, so you can't use it for operating. But that is a big one that we're going to go after and be really inventive on. And we think that, what we learned from the last cycle of not being funded and the way things are changing at the state level, we think we'll be well positioned to have a competitive application. Certainly no promises, because it's not a endless pot of money, and there's there's a lot of need out there in the state, right? All these others I mentioned, these are ones that were either competitive and also formula that we go after every chance we get. Federal, these were mentioned, bus and bus facilities program, that competitive program we're applying for this week. Low or no emission vehicle program, we continue to apply for every year. And then there's another one on the federal level that we haven't done yet, and but it's something that we could be eligible for, which is the Areas of Persistent Poverty program. And this is actually something that we do have. This new federal designation, and we do have what they define as areas of persistent poverty in our jurisdiction. And that's something that is interesting, and I think it's a really good development. The state's been on this track for several years now, and the feds, just as of this year, are on the track of making sure that there's at least a portion of funding that goes to communities that are traditionally disadvantaged or low income, or pollution burden, things like that. And there are a lot of really great mapping tools that tell us where all these locations are now. And so I think we definitely do have the ability to compete in these programs, because we do have some of those communities in our region. Unfortunately, but we do think getting some of those investments in can make a difference for those communities. And then, of course, Measure A, very glad that we have that locally formula. And then, we're looking to compete for this bike and pedestrian money to improve our bike rack on our fleet. So with that, I'll stop sharing, but just want to close and say, it's a really exciting time for us to put all the pieces together and to remind ourselves at the end of the day, we're doing this for our riders, right? Both those who ride with us today and those who maybe we want to get back or have never tried it before. But having that quality of life and having that experience where it's convenient, it's clean in all ways, and competitive with the car, so that people can throw that into the mix in their lives, and certainly benefits our environment. So with that, happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you, Hillary. Actually makes me very excited. That presentation basically goes to my happy spot. All that stuff is really good stuff. To the board, comments, questions, excitement. Make it happen. Dave. Dr. David.
I think all this goes to why I signed up for another term on the board. There's great opportunities here to do good for the community and to improve people's lives. So I'm extremely excited about all this. Keeping with the theme, I'm glad you included funding in there, and I just hope the funding isn't a slow drip, but more like a riptide. With all these projects, I think, and plus when we finish rebranding on the exterior buses, we'll make a big splash in the community.
Y'all, keeping with that, y'all know what I like to do. We're gonna surf this wave, baby.
Oh,
We're gonna surf
nicely
all the
done.
way.
Nicely done.
We're doing it, man. Okay.
I mean, my comment in terms of my thoughts on what Hillary said, it goes to also the drivers. And what I've like at ACT Expo, there was a lot of Class 8 trucks, and some of the conversations around some of the fleets have been how impactful and the opportunity for the drivers to experience electrics, and they tend to want to drive the electric Class 8s out there, and they don't get beat up as much. So I think for our drivers as well, it's going to be impactful.
Really good comment. Really good comment. Okay. Madam Clerk, anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
Howard Green has raised his hand, so I'll allow him to talk.
Okay. Mr. Green, unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's been interesting today that many of the speakers have focused on the new buses. Obviously, the appropriation or the permission to order them is important. I guess I'm a little bit concerned that there hasn't been as much focus on what you're doing for the riders. Yeah, a clean bus, but we've talked about Wi-Fi ever since the modem were upgraded on the fleet, and it doesn't seem to me like it should be terribly hard to turn that on. There's certainly a capacity question, and if everybody adopted it and used it, you'd have to have probably even more powerful modems. The passenger fare collection, the contact list. What's going to happen to the people who are 10 ride pass users? Is MTD going to consider its own plastic card that will work but give people the discounted price? I don't want to pay $1.75 when I pay, in essence, 55 cents using a 10 ride, or when I'm in class, a student pass. The signal sequence, it would be very interesting to have a chart that showed in the 5 jurisdictions that handle the signals, the county for Nolita and for South County, Carpinteria, Santa Barbara, Goleta, and the highways for on and off, like when the 12 and 24 and the 7 come down from toward the transit center. That's in the diagram that Hillary showed us for the express lanes or bus lanes. It looked like that the buses would be competing with cars in the right turn area, and cars are often held up by pedestrians that are walking that also have a walk signal. So possibly in the planning, it would be appropriate to raise the question of changing walk signal timing also. For the microgrid, Hillary's questionnaire included suggestions as to where other areas might be for the microgrid. Unfortunately, when I tried to answer the questionnaire, there was some question that I was slow in responding, and I think everything got lost. But I suggested that at least some of the microgrid focus be on Route 10, Route 37, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, State Street. The last point is nobody in this so far today has used the word shovel ready. Shovel ready is a criteria that often is used for granting funds. And how many of these projects will be shovel ready this year? My final question is, what's the timetable please, the timetable for Wi-Fi, the timetable for the new, the second bus terminal, because that will cause, I believe, the most significant change in your operations in my lifetime. Maybe not my whole lifetime, my lifetime here in Santa Barbara, because having buses out there will mean that almost all of the north end or the west end of our operations will be changed. I don't think the schedule book has changed much. We've lost a couple routes in the time that I've lived here and used the bus for over 10 years. So it would be interesting that that be raised in the planning operation and in talking about it. Sure, new buses are great.
Mr. Green, thank you for your comment. You've exceeded the time. I gave you twice the amount of time I asked for. You want to wrap it up, please?
Thank you.
Okay. Hillary, this has been a great 30,000 foot
Chair
overview.
Davis, we also have a comment from Brett Garrett.
There you go. I'm sorry. Sorry to miss that one. Mr. Garrett. There you are.
Hi, yeah, this is Brett Garrett in Goleta again. I'm fairly new to this area, but I just want to mention there's a huge opportunity. In addition to all the good things you're talking about, there's an opportunity to combine microtransit with automation. Small automated vehicles can provide very frequent on-demand service. I'm very interested in the concept of personal rapid transit, which I consider to be a best of all worlds solution, reducing waiting time and providing direct service with improved safety and energy efficiency. There's a very exciting project in East Contra Costa County being developed by a company called Glideways, that's spelled with a G-L-Y-D. They'll be using dedicated lanes and automated pod cars to serve BART stations. And this kind of system completely resolves the conundrum of more stops versus faster service, because the system can provide both. The pod car just sails past any station where nobody needs to get on or off. So it provides very direct, fast service while also allowing a station every quarter mile or so. So I think automated microtransit using dedicated lanes would come very close to reaching these kind of goals. So I do support everything you've talked about in the Next Wave project. And I do suggest to also think about automation and personal rapid transit and bring some of those ideas into the discussion. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much for your comments. Madam Clerk, I'll just double check before I jump ahead. Is there anyone else?
That is everyone at this time.
Good. Thank you so much for catching me on that one. Okay, Hillary, again, as I said, a great informational item. We're all on board, right? We're all going to be surfing that wave and being right there with you. So thank you for the update. Pretty exciting stuff. And I want to compliment, again, I know I speak for all the board members. I just want to compliment staff for the progressive movement that we're making in this direction. It's really a great effort. So thank you all for the efforts.
Thank you.
It takes us to item 11. This is the annual election of board officers. Is Chuck still here? Chuck, are you still here? Or is he just on? I think he left, but he's showing up on the thing. Not hearing. I think there's only 4 of us. I was going to suggest that we continue this item because it's one of those items that we need everybody here on in that regard. So I'd like to move that we continue this to the next board meeting. I do have an item to follow up on that though. And let me just put that out there right now. With Bill Sheeler being gone, there is no secretary currently to the board. And Dave, I'm going to ask you, would you act as the interim secretary for the next couple months until we actually get officers filled? The duties there basically are review the minutes. Christina sends the draft minutes over for review. And if there's a resolution, you attest to the chair's signature. That's the only 2 duties that are really there. Could you carry that for the next 2 months until we actually have officers in place?
I'd be glad to.
Okay, let the record show that if we could, Christina.
Got it.
Okay, a motion to continue this item, anyone? Make the motion to continue.
Before we continue,
Director Tabor.
Second.
Is there- Second by Director Lemberger. Again, Director Sarkar,
Aye.
Director Lemberger,
Aye.
Director Prodi is absent, Director McQuarrie, I believe is absent. Director Vice Chair Tabor,
yes.
and Chair Davis. So that is passes 4 with 2 absent. Somebody's got a background information or sound going on there. There you go, whoever got that. Okay, Jerry, it comes to your general manager's report, Mr. Estrada.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Davis. I know it's been a long meeting and we still have a few closed session items, so I'd be happy to answer any questions to the written report at this time.
Good. Any questions from board? Everybody's jumping up and down to ask your questions, Jerry. I think we're going to move on. Thank you very much. That takes us to item 13 and item 14. I'm going to, both are closed sessions. I'm going to read them into the record and I'm going to ask for any public comment on either of those 2 items. Item 13 is a recess to closed session on real property negotiations. The property pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. The property is 4678 Carrial 149 North San Antonio Road. Agency negotiators, General Manager Jerry Estrada, District Outside Counsel Graham Lyons, negotiating partners, Chandler Partners, and Con Am Group under negotiation of price and terms of payment. The second item will be in closed sessions, item 14. This is a recess to closed session regarding public employee performance evaluation. Board meeting closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957 and 54954.5 subsection E to evaluate the performance of the district's general manager. Madam Clerk, is there anyone who wishes to speak on either of these 2 closed session items at this time?
Mr. Green has his hand raised.
Okay, Mr. Green, you have 2 minutes.
I won't take it. I would like to, at least from a writer's perspective, compliment and Mr. Estrada and the whole team's work for the last almost 2 years now, 1.5 years. And so that's relative to the second of your closed session. I am concerned that the director's report section always follows the closed session, and that's kind of unfair for your audience because we're not going to hang around and wait for you guys to come back. It could be 15 minutes or it could be 15 hours. So please consider, Mr. Chairman, putting that agenda item above the line instead of below. Thank you, sir.
Good, I appreciate that comment. We will take that into consideration. Okay, not hearing any other public comments. Madam Clerk, no one else? Just to double check.
Thanks for double checking. No one else.
Okay, great. We will stand in recess to closed session and report back afterwards. We'll report out to open session afterwards. So Jerry, you want to, when we clear the decks, you want to lock us up and
Will do. We'll ask the attendees to drop off.